Hey all you outdoor Oklahoma lovers, I'm J.D. Strong, Director of Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. And on behalf of our 350 employees, we want to say thank you. In this unprecedented time, there's no question that there's been a lot that has confronted us as a society and as Oklahomans. But in the midst of those dark clouds, there's been a silver lining. People have been getting outdoors in droves. And because of that, we are able to see increased license sales, increased support for all things wildlife and fisheries conservation, and we're able to continue to host events like this state FFA shooting competition that we have going on behind us today. So without that support, without those license sales, we would not be able to put on stuff like this. If you didn't know it, we're a non-appropriated agency, so we get no help from the state legislature or taxpayers. So we depend heavily on those license sales as well as the sale of sporting equipment, guns, ammunition, fishing poles, bows and arrows, you name it. All of those purchases go towards us being able to get the next generation engaged in hunting and shooting sports, as well as other outdoor adventures, fishing, that sort of thing. So on behalf of the Department of Wildlife, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing us this silver lining in the midst of all these dark clouds that we faced as a result of COVID. Get out there and continue to support wildlife conservation through the purchase of your hunting and fishing license. And don't forget, our outdoors are always open.
Will please stand for the invocation by way for our, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
JD, if you'll do our introduction of guests, please.
Yes, sir. So today we have with us Scott Alls from USDA and Department of Ag, who will be on the agenda to talk about feral swine control. Still hasn't gotten them all eradicated yet, but he's chipping away at it. Laura McIver, Quail Forever. Rick Grunman with the Wildlife Foundation is here, and Susie Brewster. Good to see you as well.
Thank you, JD. Item number 6 we'll be skipping today, and we'll go straight to this. Item 7, consideration, vote to approve, amend, reject, or take other action upon the minutes of January 11th. As for a motion. Second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Brewster? Aye. Commissioner Barwick? Aye. Commissioner Gaddis? Aye. Commissioner Dillingham? Aye. Commissioner Mabry?
Here. Director's report, JD.
Thank you, sir. So I'll start with the federal report and calendar and kind of work our way backwards, if you will, towards Corey. We'll turn it over to Corey kind of at the end of the director's report this time, just to give us an update on what's happening with the legislature, which kicks off today. So lock up the women and children. On the federal side of things, you've got a report in your packet that from Brittany, and not a lot to point out there. Everybody's probably been seeing on the news what's going on in D.C. more than anything, from storming the Capitol to everything else. But seems like we've finally gotten through the transition, and more to come. We were pleased to see that the director, or essentially the deputy director of Fish and Wildlife Service appointed, was Martha Williams, who was the director of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, that I got to know really well after working with her for a little over 3 years. So more to come on that front. We'll see what happens and who else gets appointed. And not a lot else to report other than what you can see there. You can read for yourself what's in her packet. I will point out Fish and Wildlife Service did announce its final rule removing the least tern from the federal list of endangered and threatened species. So that's a species that does occur in Oklahoma. So having that taken off the list ought to make it easier for folks. And it, again, another success story of folks working together on recovery. So good news there. For us, in my state report, again, legislature today begins today. Commission Rules Committee is meeting the afternoon of February 9th. Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation is holding its virtual workshop February 23rd through the 25th. I know Mike and I are going to be on a panel during that time to talk about the fact that Oklahoma and Connecticut over the past year are the leading states in terms of growing angling. So because of that statistic, in fact, I think we're number one, right? Number one. Oklahoma was number one over the past year in terms of growing angling participation, and so The Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation wants to have us on during their workshop to talk about how we did that. So looking forward to participating in that. Let's see, some other things of interest. CFWA's Spring Directors Meeting will be March 2nd. Of course, the commission will meet again on March 1st, so a month from now. And then the 86th North American Wildlife and Natural Resources Conference, which is kind of our biggest conference of the year, will be March 8th through the 12th. That'll be virtual, and I vividly remember when COVID broke out, we were at the North American Wildlife Conference in Omaha, Nebraska, March of last year. So we're coming up on the dubious year anniversary of all of that. On the human dimension side, you can see lots of stuff going on. The second, continuing to, wrap up the controlled hunt surveys. That's, of course, polling mostly hunters, I believe, on what they're interested in terms of new raffle hunt offerings, which we'll be rolling out quite a few this coming spring, but also get a feel for what they might be willing to pay for those raffle opportunities, and using that information from Corey and her shop on the human dimension side will help inform our decisions on where we go from there. 2020 Game Harvest Survey is underway, so that of course is our annual effort to survey hunters and what they did in 2020. So we'll be looking forward to the results of that. Fish stocking continues in Fisheries Division. They assisted with Discovery Channel, is putting together, I guess, a documentary on our paddlefish program. I don't know if that's going to be just one episode or what that is. Barry, do you have details on that by chance? Oh, Jason's here. Yeah, of course. We've got our paddlefish guy.
Great info yet. I don't know when it's going to be, but it's on Discovery Channel on their streaming service, and it's a program oddly hosted by Snoop Dogg.
Oh, so you and the paddlefish and Snoop Dogg all hung out, huh? Nice. Okay, well, stay tuned for more details on that. I just saw that in my notes. I thought it was interesting. Fisheries had their annual coordination meeting with Texas Parks and Wildlife on the Lake Texoma fishery. Creel surveys at Sunset Lake continue, and that's noteworthy, as that's the place we shifted trout to from Carl Ettling when lake levels went down at Lake Carl Ettling. It looks like the preliminary results from the Creel surveys at least indicate that this lake has been wildly popular as anglers continue to catch trout there. So we'll stay tuned for more details there. Drawdown continues at Lake Jack Beaver as we prepare for upcoming dam renovation project. An I&E division, lots of activity there as well. Kelly Boyer did enter the scores for the virtual shoots in our Archery in the Schools program. So this year, we're at least preliminarily starting out all of those shoots on a virtual basis, averaging the scores to determine the top 20 elementary, middle, and high school teams. And then those top 20 teams will be invited to an in-person event, the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, on February 23rd and 24th. We had 212 schools submit scores this year through the virtual process, and that's down 30% from last year. As you can imagine, a lot of schools just simply not convening right now. So, but we still had 212 schools submit, and stay tuned for the top 20 competition later this month. You may have heard Don Brown there, our editor of Outdoor Oklahoma, just completed an ambitious project to scan and archive every edition of Outdoor Oklahoma magazine dating back to 1945. So you can now find those online on the Department of Library's digital prairie. So congratulations there, job well done. All digitized Outdoor Oklahomas. Jennifer Benj has been working on final student certification numbers that completed the online Hunter Ed course. You may recall that INE had a special kind of intensive effort to increase participation in our online Hunter Ed, especially during the COVID pandemic. That just made a lot of sense. It's a great online education course that you can take while you're stuck at home, and so we had over 5,000, in fact, over 5,100 students completed the course during this special campaign. We documented nearly $200,000 worth of contributions in the 18 months since the online course has been used as match for federal grants. So I think at the next month's meeting, we'll have Pete Churchborn from NRA in attendance to talk about the successful collaboration between us and NRA to be able to provide this free online hunter education course. INE's also working on fleshing out a new section of our Cy Curtis program to recognize the Oklahoma Slam and the Oklahoma Super Slam. So folks that have been able to take those slam species will be able to have a special recognition within that Cy Curtis program. And a couple of our newer employees, Sarah Sutherland and Smokey Salas, mentored a Hispanic family on their first duck hunt, and Sarah completed an article about the hunt to use in several of our media outreach efforts, as well as sharing it with Echo, which is Hispanics enjoying camping, hunting, and the outdoors. So be a cool story. Stay tuned for that. Wildlife Division, of course, have wrapped up a wildly successful deer season with a new state record harvest. I think we ended up with 125,977 deer harvested, last I checked, which was yesterday. So great job, everybody there. Also want to mention the Farm Service Agency approved the department's Conservation Reserve Program State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement proposal. This is a proposal to give landowners enrolling in CRP a more wildlife-friendly cover type option. The CRP SAFE proposal is targeted at providing improved habitat for bobwhite quail, lesser prairie chicken, and monarch butterflies. The enrollment period for the general CRP sign-up ends February 12th. So we're looking forward to getting folks signed up there and doing some great things for quail, chickens, and monarchs, and there'll be a number of other species that benefit from that as well. Bill can tell you everything you want to know about the folks in Wildlife Division. Have been working busy to put together WMA plans. So I think at this point they've got all the initial data entry done for that project. So they're now working on the dashboard component of that, but basically essentially working on online wildlife management area plans for all of our WMAs to just be able to kind of document what we're doing on the WMAs, what needs to be done, help us prioritize the work that needs to be done on those, and also provide an opportunity for if somebody retires, leaves, somebody else gets hired to come in and manage that wildlife management area, they'll have kind of the recipe book right there in front of them. But more than anything for us, I think it's a way to be able to better prioritize our work, and as we look at the budget, figure out where we need to prioritize our money to make sure those wildlife management areas are in the best shape they can be. And that also reminds me, Kristen, who was on the agenda but can't be here today, is working on another project that we'll probably come and update you on that also came out of the strategic plan, which is how do we better roll out the welcome mat on our wildlife management areas. So when it comes to prioritizing those projects, how can we make it more attractive? Parking lot, bathroom, whatever it is, campgrounds. How can we attract more people to those wildlife management areas? So a lot of work going on that front as well. And you can see the wrap up of 2020 Law Enforcement Division's work, over 2 million miles driven, and you can see everything else going on there in Law Enforcement Division. I know they had a busy COVID season in particular, as we saw people in the outdoors more than ever. Sounded like kind Compliance-wise, though, having that new Brant online system for us has really driven up compliance with licensing and that sort of thing. So that's good news as well. I was going to give an update on stuff happening with the foundation, but since Rick is here, Rick, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind to give us an update on what's happening with the foundation. Either way, either mic.
Thank you, JD, and Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity. Wanted to spend some time. Some of the feedback I've received from the Commissioners is you haven't heard enough feedback about what's going on at the foundation, so wanted to just spend a couple minutes, give you a very quick high-level update on some of the things we're doing, and then if you have any questions, you can ask now, or we can follow up after the meeting or online or whatever it may be. But a quick reminder, the mission of the Oklahoma Wildlife Conservation Foundation is Oklahomans dedicated to conserving, preserving, and protecting our wildlife, wild spaces, and our outdoor heritage for current and future generations. It is a 501c3, and our entire focus is on supporting the efforts of the department and its mission. That's where all of our resources go and all of our focus goes, but it has to be a collaboration. We don't want to push anything forward that isn't on the part of the department's goals. And so JD and myself and so many in the department, we're building a great working relationship, and hopefully that will show as we move forward. We've been focused during this COVID issue. I started July 1. The focus has been on spreading awareness of the foundation and getting wins to show what the foundation is capable of. Some examples have been, one of the commissioners was gracious enough to set up a presentation in front of the Dallas Safari Club Oklahoma City chapter, was able to present to them. I've been on radio shows in the Oklahoman. We've had multiple meetings with Quail Forever, with Laura, with Ducks Unlimited, Delta, Midway USA Foundation, donors, potential donors, and we're even starting working with some corporate partners that have some very high potential, I think, to help the agency and the foundation move forward with our goals. I'd be grateful for any leads or recommendations you may have for people that you'd like us to meet with as we try to spread the word about the foundation, because people won't give to something they're not aware of. From a very simple thing, my wife and daughter, we are on Amazon Smile. We're an approved charity, and my wife and daughter are single-handedly trying to make sure that we get to our goals through Amazon purchases through the Amazon Smile app. One of the efforts that we have we're funding, but also partially funding, is helping with the department's branding effort. We will work in a co-branding type alignment with them going forward. We have an exciting event coming up that we're finalizing as kind of our first social event. Will be at the Wildlife Expo. We will be either Friday or Saturday night. It has not been finalized. Rhonda, Barry, and myself met last week with the Lazy E, and we're waiting on their bids to finalize which way we go. But we will be having a function after the Wildlife Expo that evening with dinner, some entertainment, some raffle and auction type opportunities to kind of celebrate, see what the department is doing through the expo, and celebrate the foundation and how we can help the department move its mission forward. Sent out some end-of-the-year cards. Hopefully you guys received those. Just a little outreach on that. We have been approved by the Oklahoma City Community Foundation for an endowment match. As we set up an endowment, we're going to be looking for additional matching sponsors and donors for that. We have until November to fund that and receive the match, and we're well on our way on that. We received a sponsorship of the Fostering Outdoor Oklahoma Families Fishing Event. Aetna Insurance wrote a nice check to help sponsor those events. I'm meeting Wednesday, Reagan Siegfried and myself are meeting with John Grondike on Wednesday in Enid as we start ramping up the Hackberry Flat fundraising efforts. We will be trying to raise upwards of a total of $8 million for the project to replace the pipe at Hackberry Flat to ensure that we can bring water back to that world-class wetland area and move forward with that. I want to thank all of you that have supported the foundation, and those of you that haven't had the opportunity would certainly welcome your participation. And we have quite a few exciting projects coming up in 2021 that we'll speak about in the future. And with that.
Did you have a question?
I did. A couple questions real quick. On the Oklahoma City Community Foundation, is there a limit to the matching that they've put in place, and is it dollar for dollar, or?
Great question. It's the initial agreement that's in place is if we raise $25,000, they will match $15,000. And so we're going to look for a total of a $40,000 endowment. What I envision this becoming over time, what I would love to do is if we over time build that to a large enough size that we can have the operating costs of the foundation covered by the endowment so that all contributions that come in after we reach that breaking point, that we cover O&M and then everything goes dollar for dollar to projects.
They distribute right now 4 or 5% a year of the total corpus?
5%.
And so if you backed into what that number would need to be, what our goal is to get that to in order to cover?
It's a very fair question, and one I'd be happy to discuss with you. A lot of it depends upon what next steps and how much the foundation grows. Can very easily do it with being a one-person shop right now, but if we grow and have needs to expand upon that, obviously those numbers would change. You bet.
One last question. You all had looked at a gala, kind of a rollout fundraiser event for the foundation last fall. Had to be canceled or postponed because of COVID concerns. Has that been rescheduled, or are we still kind of waiting to see how the COVID numbers trail off?
Great question, and it's actually on the list of topics that I'll be discussing with Mr. Grondike because he was going to be recognized at that event, and because of COVID, the renaming of the building, there was going to be a function associated with that had to be postponed, understandably, because of COVID. As being able to have public events has lasted longer than I think anybody would certainly like or want. The first event that we felt comfortable with the information that we got, will be in September at the Expo, which will be a covered structure, but the sides are open. It will be socially distanced. Hopefully everyone will have already had their vaccinations or have recovered safely from it, but out of an abundance of caution, that event will be covered, but it will be socially distanced. We even had discussions about getting larger size tables, but underfilling the tables, getting a 10-person table and filling it with, say, 6, 7, or 8, and ensuring that there's spacing in the tables. But I want to have that conversation with Mr. Grondike and see what his comfort level is to ensure that we recognize his 40-plus years of service to the department. You bet. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Any other questions about the foundation? Oh, yes. Yeah, so Rack Madness is going to be virtual this year. And so it's not going to be about rack scoring as much as it's going to be, well, it actually is going to be about rack scoring, but we're going to have a week-long virtual seminars that will live stream online and show people how to score a typical rack, how to score an atypical rack. I don't know what else, Wade, you all have lined up for that week yet, but. Yeah. Yeah, we felt like this wasn't a good spring to try to create in-person madness, because that's all about getting a mob in here, you know, and getting folks fired up about deer. So, but our folks are still available to do scoring as they have in the past. They're just spread out across the state. A lot of game wardens, biologists, all are scorers, and they're happy to take people's racks in and score them socially distanced. Wade, do you have something else?
Department, if I've got my measuring problem, will I be able to just talk to you then, or how's the interaction gonna work, or is there any?
There'll be some, but I'll now, Michael, you wanna talk about that, but we wanna be able to have you live looking at us measure.
Yeah, and if we have like several hundred tuned in to that live stream, we can't stop for each person that's stumbling along the way probably, but there are abilities to comment on all of these social media channels that we have, so people can fill out a question that we can get back to them on, I would assume, right? I see.
We may have to figure out a way to let them ask questions, through text, and we can answer them.
Yeah. Last week in February, and we'll be sure to blast that out, of course, and gin up as much interest as we can. We haven't talked about that. Since we're not gonna have people here in person trying to draw them in, we hadn't talked about whether or not we need to do raffle giveaways. What we have talked about instead this year is maybe approach the foundation about at least sponsoring a lifetime license for as we do controlled hunts and raffle hunts. We wanna put a lifetime license raffle out there, I think. Isn't that in the mix?
It is in the mix, and they're on the hook to cover it if we don't raise
The money, yeah. We don't raise $775. February 22nd through the 26th, virtual Rack Madness Week. It has, yeah. Right, yeah, it's a shame. We have to do something a little different this year, but we're gonna do everything possible to keep the interest peaked and try not to miss a beat too much, so to speak. Yeah.
You should have the ability then to record and put links out there so that if someone wanted to see a particular segment and couldn't, they can go back and
Yes.
watch that later.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Because it's going out on our YouTube channel, I assume, right? So that's always available to re-watch later. Yeah, good questions. So last but certainly not least, the legislative session is kicked off, and I know Corey provided a list of the bills that she's tracking for us in your packets. Corey, you want to walk through some of those?
Sure. I won't probably go into detail on all of them, but so a few of you guys probably know there are over 3,000 bills filed, so quite a few. I've skimmed over most of them, and searched our statutes, and we're about 30 bills that are either Title 29 or mention wildlife. There's a lot of other bills that I'm monitoring on different tracking lists that aren't quite specific to our agency, but could be in some way. So just so you know, there are a ton of other bills, obviously. Legislative session starts around noon today, and yeah, we're at about 30 bills on this list, so I'll just run right through them. House Bill 1112 by Representative John Talley. This is a repeat from the last couple years that we've tried to get through, that essentially moves our trapping, fur bearer, and squirrel statutes out of statute and lets us set seasons and methods of take by administrative rule like we do with everything else. That's kind of a relic of the past, where squirrel seasons specifically set in statute, trapping methods are specifically set in statute, and so we're just trying to make it a little bit easier on our constituents by doing that by administrative rule. The next few bills on the list are shell bills by Speaker Charles McCall. He actually files these for just about every section, if not all sections of law, so it's not unique to Title 29, but those are available if somebody needs a vehicle to run a wildlife bill. House Bill 1575 by Representative David Smith also is related to squirrels. It actually sets in statute that squirrel season's a year long. So we are going to continue to try to work on the other bill that I was mentioning with Representative Talley and try to do that by administrative rule if that's the direction that we decide to take with squirrels to begin with. House Bill 1576 is, it just provides penalties for if you knowingly remove a tracking collar from a hunting dog, so that might be something of interest to some of our constituents, just kind of monitoring that one, seeing where it goes. I'm sure you've all heard about the next one. House Bill 1648 establishes a Bigfoot hunting season, lets us create fees for that. We'll see what happens. House Bill 1693 is a bill that makes it a little bit easier for landowners to shoot depredating fur bearers. We'll probably have to work with Representative Newton on that one because it's I think the aim was to deal with coyotes, but it's all fur bearers, and so just tweaks the language enough to make it a little bit concerning. So we have some other bills that we're working with Senator Murdoch in the Senate to address some nuisance animals. So we'll see what we can do with that one. House Bill 1768 is a request from us. We are required to reauthorize our wildlife diversity tax checkoff every 4 years, and this is just a bill to do that. So pretty easy bill that lets us continue that program. House Bill 2101 is another shell bill, nothing in there. House Bill 2214 by Representative McDougall. This is one of our big agency request bills that essentially moves all of our licenses out of statute, lets you all have the ability to take the reins over licensing, let us overhaul them. That is the ultimate goal, is to clean up our licensing and also set fees by administrative rule. So it would be a huge change for us, let us be a lot more nimble with the way that we do licensing. You can see all the sections that are mentioned on this nice list here. It repeals, I think, 30 different sections, which are all pretty much different types of licenses that add up to about 150 licenses that we have, so it's a much needed change. It is a big bill, so we will work hard to get that one through and hopefully get some traction on it. House Bill 2366 by our new Wildlife House Chairman, Ty Burns, is just a shell bill, nothing in there. House Bill 2639 by Representative Roberts is also a shell bill relating to feral hogs. No language quite yet. House Bill 2721 by Representative Blancett is actually not a request bill, but one we think might have some potential positive impacts for us. It's a wanton waste. It establishes penalties for discarding edible meat. House Bill 2778, this is actually just a courts bill. It's a housekeeping measure requested by the DAs, asking, I think, just for destruction of records, cleanup, nothing major there. House Bill 2858 by Representative Roberts establishes state employee discounts for hunting and fishing licenses. So while I'm an employee and I love that idea, I don't for our agency. It could potentially result in some significant fiscal impacts on our licensing because there are a significant number of state employees. So I think it's tiered based on how many years of service you have, starting with like 7 years. So we will get with Representative Roberts on that one. House Resolution 1002 by Representative John Talley is in support of public lands in Oklahoma. This is really a request from the Nature Conservancy with a coalition of a lot of different groups, including us, to just show our support for public lands across the state, not just our properties that we own and lease, but any public land that's open for hunting, fishing, wildlife recreation, general use. And so it's just, as a resolution, it doesn't really do anything other than show support for that cause. So that will be a good way to highlight public lands this session. On the Senate side, we have Senate Bill 47. This is one that was a request from the state courts. And again, it's really just a housekeeping measure. It lets our wardens, if they're physically in court with a violator whose license is suspended, it lets the court give that license to the warden rather than mail it to us. So simple change, but it has to be done, I guess. Senate Bill 769 creates a mountain lion season. We are chatting with Representative Murdoch about that. So we'll
Senator.
Oh, sorry.
He
Senator,
was a representative, now he's a senator.
Senate Bill 770 is our Senate companion, or Senate version of the Wildlife Diversity Tax Checkoff Bill. So it does the same thing, it just reauthorizes it for another 4 years. And it is already set for committee tomorrow afternoon. So I am already having to get to work and talk to a committee and this is not a wildlife committee, this is the Senate Finance Committee. So things are kicking off pretty fast. Senate Bill 772, this is the one I was mentioning, the coyote depredation bill that we've actually provided some language to Murdoch. It's not in this current bill right now, so it'll have to be filed as an amendment, but makes it a little bit easier for landowners to deal with nuisance coyotes, specifically at night. The amendment that we provided him actually significantly increases spotlighting penalties. So if you kill a deer or other game at night, the fines, if this bill passes with our amendment, would be, I think, multiplied times 10. I think it's like $250 right now minimum. We're requesting $2,500 minimum with confiscation, revocation. So that should be a good thing for law enforcement and landowners. Senate Bill 773 would allow landowners and other folks to kill prairie dogs without permits. It's really aimed at nuisance wildlife and probably not necessary since landowners don't need a hunting license to begin with. So we're working with Murdoch on that one. Senate Bill 774 is the Senate version of our license bill. So again, it does the exact same thing. It takes all the licenses out of statute, lets us deal with those by administrative rule. And I will add, it is a long bill, but you can see a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff at the beginning of it if you decide to read it. It also would allow us to set discounts, have specials. So if we said, hey, COVID hit, we're going to give 20% off licenses, we can do that by administrative rule or even by resolution, and the bill would allow us to do that. It keeps the penalties in here, and it does specifically create a 365-day license. That was one of the things that legislators really wanted us to do, and we actually also wanted to do it. So we put that in the bill, and that is the only license language that is specifically in the bill. So, yeah.
I think it also gives us more flexibility on our funds. Right now in the law, it says a certain percentage of all these different kinds of license sales must go towards land acquisition or go towards this. And if we get this bill passed, it gives us the flexibility to use that money more for wildlife management area maintenance and improvement, as opposed, like if we're in a mode where we don't really need to or want to buy another property, we can use that money for property maintenance, which is increasingly becoming a challenge for us, so.
Yeah, so we kept all of our funds, so we're not getting rid of the funds, so we can still put our money somewhere, but it actually amends the language on both ends, so you all would have the authority to determine what money goes into those funds. And then within those funds, it does say, like, the land fund is still gonna be used for land, but you can determine if it's, this year it's 100% of that money that we wanna spend is for maintenance versus acquisition. So it does give you guys a lot more flexibility with, those decisions on a year-to-year basis. And that's probably gonna get missed in the bill, cause it's just, a couple sentences very far down in there, but, it is a big piece of it. Senate Bill 776 is a bill that essentially prohibits us from purchasing, leasing, having land donated to us, in the future, so.
That's where.
Slight concerns with that one.
Yeah, that's where the action's gonna be,
Yes, so
unfortunately, this legislative session.
we've already heard from a few of our partner groups, with concerns on that one, as well. We have some concerns with that as well, but Senate Bill 812 is another version of the, district attorney's bill that just requests that, wildlife crime records can get destroyed after a certain amount of time. Senate Bill 839 by Senator Dom would prohibit game wardens from, placing cameras on private property without permission. This is actually something we don't do to begin with, but the language also doesn't allow that to happen even with a warrant. So it's pretty restrictive for law enforcement if there is a need that arises. So we'll chat with Senator Dom about that, see maybe where it came from. Senate Bill 964 is actually for all law enforcement. It prohibits them from entering private property with landowner permission unless there's a life or death emergency, essentially. So this would essentially restrict our game wardens from doing any of their work on private land unless they had landowner permission. So there are some concerns there in terms of just general law enforcement, but it's not specifically for game wardens, it is for all the law enforcement. And then Senate Resolution 1, which I have heard is actually, the number is going to change to something else, but it's the Senate version of the Public Lands Resolution, just in support of public lands. So that's it.
Questions about legislation? Yeah, we could.
I think you can create a rule to allow that.
Yeah, it would essentially, you all set every other season, either by rule or by resolution, and squirrel is the last season left in statute that the dates are set for the squirrel season. Oddly enough, I mean, deer, the most popular species in the state, we all decide what the season needs to be, yet squirrel's still stuck in statute. So this is just pulling it out so you could handle squirrel the same way you handle everything else.
But it does specifically say by rule. Yeah, and this actually, it came from two different constituent groups, and we combined their requests together. So falconers reached out to us, and they want a longer squirrel season so they can do falconry longer. There's also squirrel hunters that clearly want a year-round season, as the request from Representative Smith shows. And then our trappers, the trapping language is like, you can only use these specific kinds of traps, and trap technology has changed, and it's not really clear if the new traps fall under the law. And anyway, so I think it'll be good for us, but also for those groups. It should be an easy bill, but it's taken 3 years, so we'll see.
COVID got in the way.
COVID did get in the way.
Last session's attempt to get it passed, but yeah.
Any other questions?
And that general premise kind of applies across the board, right? I mean, we would like to think the commission and our staff using biological data should be the ones setting the season, and the legislature can always step in if we're out of line, but as long as we're allowing our biological data to drive the decisions, and making sure we have healthy, sustainable populations. So, so we had this conversation with Senator Murdoch because he's proposed a mountain lion season, and we had the same conversation with him about the fact that, you know, just maybe let us take a look at it and see what we think we can do. And so that's what we're starting to have the conversations about now. Make sure we've got healthy, sustainable populations of stuff. That was our response to the Bigfoot bill, believe it or not. We don't have any data to show we have a healthy, sustainable population of Sasquatches. Anyway, that's gonna continue to be our mantra.
I have a question regarding squirrel season.
Yes.
I was asked not long ago if flying squirrels are included in that season, and I couldn't find anything.
They're not.
So there's,
It's red and it's fox and gray squirrels, right? Yeah.
okay, there is no legal hunting for flying squirrels.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, emphasis on legal.
Kind
I'm
of
not sure
suspected
if
that, but I
people
thought
are.
I'd just check with.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions about legislative stuff? Stay tuned. I've got a meeting in the next day or two with Cattlemen's Association on public land. You may have heard they had their policy meetings last week at the statewide level at least, and I know they're in Woodward this evening. They're starting to make it around the state for their kind of regional meetings, but I guess the number one topic on their at their state policy meetings was Department of Wildlife buying public land and that sort of thing. So we'll meet and see what the issues are there and see if we can help solve some problems and resolve some concerns. Thank you, sir. That's it.
Thank you, J.D. I had one question going back to the foundation. Do we have a section in the website that addresses the foundation, its scope, its purpose? Anybody?
You know, I don't know if we have anything on our website, Daniel, the webmaster. Foundation's got a website of its own that talks about all of that. Its mission, and I know Rick's, you know, continually working on that, refining that, bios on the foundation members, that sort of thing. But I don't think we have anything on the department's website that describes it.
Should we put a link on it?
Seems like that might be a good spot. Everybody picks up our regulations and proclamations to just have a section in there that talks about the foundation, its purpose and scope, and because I know there's always people out there looking to make donations for one reason or another, tax credits, but that way if it was on the website, it'd be permanently, people could see that and locate that. And then the other thing, have we ever done an article about the foundation?
Yeah, we're starting to do that now in the Outdoor Oklahoma magazines. Yeah, there's one in there right now, in fact.
Okay.
So the past couple of issues, I think that I&E is devoting a page or two of the magazine to foundation stuff. So it's there. I&E started featuring the foundation in the WOG, the monthly blog that goes out, email that goes out to all of our staff and including retirees. And they've been lately featuring a different foundation board member every month when that goes out. So, yeah.
The chairman's question reminded me of something you had said, J.D., on some of the needs assessments that I think Bill's putting together for the WMAs on whether they're equipment lists or capital improvements and this, that, and the other. And it goes back, I think having those, I'm served for a number of years on the Nature Conservancy state board, and we do that for all of our different preserves and list kind of a priorities needs list. And it'd be a great way for people, you'd be surprised how many people will see that and donate equipment or different things like that, and they could do that through the foundation. So linking those two together, once we get those lists together, would be really good.
Yeah. Yeah, good idea for sure.
The other thing, just on that topic real quick, is also through the Nature Conservancy at each of the preserves, they have a volunteer day. So for people who go out and use our WMAs, if we broadcast out and we want to have a cleanup day or do something that we need more manpower, it'd be a good way to get, engaged activity from the folks that are using it as well, so.
Yeah, you're right. We see a number of our conservation partners, organizations do that, organize their own Quail Forever. Backcountry hunters and anglers, I know, has been pretty active in organizing their membership. Hey, let's all meet up at such and such WMA and do a cleanup day kind of deal. So we're starting to see some more of that happen just by those organizations organizing it. But you're right, we could take some initiative maybe and see what we could gin up on our own. Yeah, good.
Thank you, Commissioner Dillingham, for those comments. Appreciate that. Moving on to the next item, agenda number 9, the presentation of the December 31 financials. Amanda Stork. Amanda?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Strong, Commissioners. So today I have for you the financial statements for the first half of the fiscal year. I'll direct you first to the combined balance sheet of all fund types and account groups. So for December 31st, 2020, our liabilities and fund balance is $473,939,264, of which $20,757,677 is liabilities, compared to last year of $428,008,624. Our trust fund combined balance sheet, we have an expendable trust balance of $31,932,984, non-expendable trust balance of $94,893,388, pension trust fund balance of $133,741,654, our DC trust balance of $4,835,182, for a total of $265,403,208, compared to last year at $237,899,071. Next, on our combined statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, our total revenue is $28,884,928. Our total expenditures is $27,724,618, leaving an excess of $1,160,310, compared to last year of $37,827,457, which is 43.62% higher. Our next combined statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for trust funds. You can see our interest and investment income of $16,787,371. Our total operating revenue for the year so far is $22,683,507. And our total fund balance that ties to our previous report is $233,470,224, compared to last year of $217,462,044. On the next page, you'll see the contributions report for a total of $2,980. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions about the financials?
Motion. Second. Discussion. Roll call.
Commissioner Brewster? Aye. Commissioner Barway? Aye. Commissioner Gaddis? Aye. Commissioner Dillingham? Aye. Commissioner Mabry?
Aye. Agenda item number 10, the presentation of Oklahoma native non-game fishes and bow fishing management. Barry Bolton.
Good Monday morning. So in my nearly 30 years of addressing this Wildlife Commission, this today is a first. Fisheries Division has never brought to you an agenda item dealing with native non-game fishes. And we're talking about gars, buffalo, carpsucker, paddlefish, suckers, a few other species. But some of you might have in the back of your mind what a lot of people think, and that's, you know, rough fish, trash fish. And historically, they've been viewed that way. But, you know, some 50 years ago, even ODWC encouraged commercial fishermen to net these species. A lot of state agencies felt like reducing rough fish populations would enhance sport fish production. And we've come to believe a little differently on that. But so today, Jason and I want to plant a seed with you. When you think warm and cuddly, I was talking with Commissioner Gaddis, when you think warm and cuddly, I mean, who thinks of big mouth buffalo? I mean, typically not. I mean, bear cub hugs are fun, but not buffalo. So I'm asking you to stick with us for about 15 minutes while Jason shares his information from research and explains why perception of these species must be adjusted. Jason spends much of his time, by way of introduction, Jason Schooley, with paddlefish research, and he's more recently kind of turned a portion of his focus to other fish species. And on top of that, Jason's one heck of a fisheries scientist. So Jason, hand it over to you.
Yeah, and as he's coming up, I might just also mention, you know, next month we'll have the rule-making proposals to consider. All the comments that have come in, there was probably nothing that generated more comments in the rule-making process than some of the proposals on bow fishing. So keep this in mind, what Jason's going to lay out as you think about the rule proposal for bow fishing that will come before you next month as well. And then the last thing I'll say is, as the chairman of our Fisheries and Water Resources Policy Committee at our National Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, we're pleased to include Jason and his colleagues on the agenda for our upcoming North American conference as we convene our committee, and he's going to lay out some of this groundbreaking research that you know, you're seeing it here first. Most other states haven't done any research along these lines to look at these formerly called rough fish species. We got to get a new vernacular for them, right? So take it away, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for having me. That was a great segue, because that's the reason I'm here, is because we have these regulatory changes, and this is a really timely discussion. And you'll also notice I gave you some paperwork to look at, and I'll make reference to that here in a second. But Barry referenced, you know, rough fish, trash fish, but that's really not a good name for these species. And as my title reflects, we call them native non-game species, non-game fishes. They're native because they've evolved here and they belong here and they deserve to be here in perpetuity. They're non-game fish because they're officially not a game fish. So by default, they're a non-game fish. And that's just a legal definition. That's not a pejorative saying they're lesser than a game fish. It's just how we legally regulate them. So that has a lot of relevance in respect to bow fishing, and that's going to be kind of the two topics I discussed with you today, these particular species and then bow fishing and how they interact. So this effort really kind of began in earnest about 3 years ago in summer 2018 when Bass Pro had a very sizable tournament in Oklahoma, actually in Broken Arrow. And we partnered with Bass Pro and had an information booth and collected some data and surveyed all their bow anglers, and it was really kind of a big deal. Pretty high profile tournament, brought a lot of people into Oklahoma, and really kind of opened our eyes as to the extent of this sport and its recent growth. And we're seeing, you know, proliferation of tournaments nationwide. So for all intents and purposes, it is an expanding sport, and I challenge you to find any popular article about bow fishing where they don't say it's the fastest growing fishing sport there is. I believe I've read that statement so many times in so many different ways, and based on what we've discovered, it seems to be true. In addition to big tournaments with big cash prizes, rapidly expanding interest in non-tournament bow fishing as well. For all ages and, you know, all types of people. and it includes many native trophy species. As you can see here, a large alligator gar, but it's not always just large fish, it's large quantities of fish, so that's something we're going to talk about too. And it's not just native species, it's practice for invasive species, particularly Asian carps, common carp, grass carp, etc., all of which are found in Oklahoma. But we looked at numerous sources of data showing that bow fishing is increasing in popularity. And we even have a growing archery in the schools program in Oklahoma, which is a good thing we have, but that's just an example of how the sport is growing nationwide. But unfortunately, bow fishing management, or lack thereof, it's lagging far behind. There are fewer than 10 published papers on bow fishing when we started this initiative, and that was pretty shocking. So we had all this great data from that big tournament, and we're like, okay, let's look into the literature, and wow, there's nothing out there. So that sort of gave us the motivation to say, look, we need to make something a little bit more of this than just one tournament. All those 10 studies were very localized, and of course, nationwide, there's generally a lack of concern for these native non-game species. As you said, they're held in poor regard. They're not game fish, so this sort of reflected in the priorities of management agencies such as our own. There's no research going on. There's no protection. But even worse, there's fewer or no stock assessments. Well, unfortunately, the sport itself is largely unregulated. So a lot of these native fishes are being shot with no stock assessment, so we don't know if they're sustainable or not. And that's really unfortunate. Now there are a couple exceptions to that. Of course, the paddlefish and alligator gar in Oklahoma are very well studied and highly managed. And in fact, Oklahoma is probably leading the way for those two species combined in our management and conservation. But we needed to kind of extend that to some of these other species who have a lot in common with them as far as their life history. So just to sort of give you a preview of what I'm going to talk about here. We got these native non-game species, including the paddlefish, including the alligator gar, including 3 other gar species in Oklahoma, but also including some lesser known species, the bigmouth buffalo, smallmouth buffalo, black buffalo, as well as other similar carp-looking fish like the river carpsucker, high-fin carpsucker, etc., bowfin. All are considered native non-game species, which are often targeted by bow fishers. So we're interested in the species themselves, the impacts of the sport, and how we can sort of manage that with research and regulation primarily. So for our paper, we sort of expanded this effort, and we looked nationwide. We did a comprehensive review of bow fishing, how it's managed in all 50 states, and then took into account the life history characteristics of those species often targeted. And what we found was pretty interesting, and a really needed paper at this time for the long-term conservation of these species. So as a management agency, it felt pretty important for me to sort of take this to the next level. And that's why I'm here today and why we're talking with other states about bow fishing and non-game native species and the kind of management actions that we need. So commissioners, I gave each of you a copy of our latest Outdoor Oklahoma magazine, and inside it is a copy of the paper that we put out. And this is a scientifically peer-reviewed paper that came out, I believe, late October, early November. And we followed that up with a popular article in our Outdoor Oklahoma magazine, which you also have a copy of. So if you haven't seen this, if this is news to you, I really ask and encourage you to check out at least the Outdoor Oklahoma article. The scientific article is quite lengthy, but it's easy to read and it's interesting. But those are the bases for what we're talking about here. We looked at all the scientific evidence. We looked at bow fishing from as many angles as we could, not only from the non-game native conservation angle, but from the invasive species angle. It is a valuable sport, and it can be practiced responsibly. But what we're trying to encourage is taking a sustainable look at bow fishing for native non-game species. So this initiative, if you will, that we're just kind of starting up, it's spreading out there. My colleague, Dr. Dennis Skarnecki, and I, we were guests on the Fisheries podcast, and it's kind of an interesting episode. I encourage you to check it out if you're into that. This was also covered by Nature Conservancy, Cool Green Science blog, and there have been several other articles that picked up on the paper and are kind of applying it to their local scenarios. For example, the St. Croix River, which is the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I just found out yesterday, I wasn't able to put it in this slide, but Kansas has actually taken sort of these topics we're discussing here, and they have begun to initiate a management effort for alternative fishing methods, as they're calling it, which includes snagging and bow fishing, and they're starting to look at these species as well. So we're not alone, but we are leading the way, I think. So of some of the evidence we uncovered regarding bow fishing, it makes sense to kind of think in context of bow hunting for a few minutes. So we're adept at managing for bow hunting. We have lots of really great big game species in Oklahoma, including, deer and turkey and elk. And then, of course, we have some invasive issues such as, feral hogs. Well, it's fairly common among all these big game species bow hunted that the males are easily distinguished from the females, just visibly by looking at them. So, of course, your male deer and elk have nice antlers. Your turkeys have, plumage and beards and, various other characteristics. And, of course, your feral swine have larger tusks for males. And in this case, all the largest trophy targets are males. They all generally have short lifespans, 13 years or less, and generally they will regularly reproduce on an annual basis. So that all these things kind of make management a little predictable and easy. You can manage for male harvest, you can manage for female harvest. They do reproduce on a regular basis, so that's good. However, for bow fishing, in contrast to bow hunting, males and females are generally not distinguishable in the field. If this fish pops up in the water and you shoot at it, you cannot make a decision that that is a male or female because they're not externally distinguishable. And in great contrast to bow hunted species, the largest trophy targets are females. So if you see a big fish, it's likely an old female. And the reason that's important is because these old female fish may have a long lifespan, and those are going to be the most valuable specimens in that stock as far as sustainability and conservation. And unfortunately, unlike those bow hunted species and unlike many of our game fishes, they have inconsistent and episodic reproduction, meaning that they'll have a really good recruitment year, but then that'll be followed by many years of inadequate or lack of reproduction. And that's okay when they get to live a long time, up to 100 years. But if they're all shot before they reach 20, that doesn't do very well for sustainable management. So we have some new evidence from the literature on all these native non-game species, particularly the big-mouthed buffalo, alligator gar. They are long-lived. In Minnesota, big-mouthed buffalo were aged up to 112 years, and that is a shocking number, and it set the record for the longest-lived freshwater fish. Now, in Oklahoma, we have both big-mouthed buffalo and alligator gar, which have been aged up to 94, 95 years old. Now, that's pretty amazing. And like I mentioned, they have episodic recruitment, strong in some years, weak in others, and then the largest fish are females. So this is important. Most of this evidence has come out in the last 15 years. As Barry mentioned, we used to manage these species far different. There was no regard for their conservation. They were actually removed on purpose. Well, as a result of that attitude and the continued social stigma for some of these non-game species, many of these stocks of these species do not contain these old, large fish, and that's because of overharvest. Now, that's one thing we want to look into in Oklahoma and have a better understanding of that and how we can manage these species. Yes, sir.
I had a question, you know, as these species get older, is it typical like in any species, the females quit producing as they get older?
Not exactly, no. And we know this pretty strongly from our paddlefish work, which has a lot of, crossover to buffaloes and gars as far as life history. Those large females actually have the greatest reproductive capacity. So they're oldest, they're largest, the greatest fraction of their body weight is made up of reproductive material such as eggs. So no, they do senesce, but they do it over a very short period within their lifespan, and that's at the very tail end. Valuable question, though. So our paper looked at, of course, status of bow fishing in the U.S., and Oklahoma is one of those states. We found that it's legal in all 50 states. There's very little monitoring. Only a fishing license is required, and most states reported that bow fishing is expanding. 31 states reported having tournaments, whereas only 9 states reported having education programs. So 3 times as many states have tournaments than have bow fishing education. And sadly, the worst statistic of all, 0 states reported having any management plans or goals for bow fishing. And that includes Oklahoma, unfortunately. So, Oklahoma, of course, we do have tournaments. We do have a vibrant bow fishing education program. So we're doing some things okay. And we are, monitoring some of this, at least in the infancy stages. A lot of the states we surveyed had shared management concerns, and some of those extend, of course, into Oklahoma. Primarily, they deal with inadequacies in data, and that's because nobody's looking at bow fishing, nobody's looking at these native non-game species. States generally don't know who bow fishers are, they generally don't know what they're taking, or what species and how many. They generally have concerns over perception of bow fishing, wanton waste, for example, and conflicts with other angler groups and, shoreline landowners. Also concerns over poaching, aquatic nuisance species, etc. But in summation, basically, we need to know who is bow fishing in Oklahoma. We need to know where and what species they're taking. We have to create, actually, and promote responsibly managed bow fisheries, just like we do for other types of fishing opportunities. We need to be surveying bow fishing tournaments. That's just a perfect opportunity to look at what's being taken, how many, and where. And we have to provide adequate educational resources to all bow fishers, which I think we're doing at this point. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All types, and that's a good question because the definition of a tournament and the scope and the breadth and how many waters are utilized and the size varies widely. We have some states that have tournaments with 250 teams competing. We have other tournaments on a local lake where it may be very spatially restricted. They may have 10 teams. It's held on a Thursday night. It's kind of a fun thing to do. So, valuable question. The whole spectrum of tournaments were reported by 31 states.
Hey, just a heads up, Jason, if you don't mind me making the heads up, we have a commissioner that's got to depart at 10:30 and we'll lose our quorum, and we've got a couple of action items, number 11 and number 14, I think. So I'm wondering if, and I think we need to have a good discussion here. I'm wondering if we ought to just hit the pause real quick maybe and jump to those and come back, as disruptive as that is. just
Your call.
didn't know about it until then. I don't want to rush you through this because I think it's important, so if you don't mind, we might just hit the pause button on this, jump to 11 and 14, because you've got to have action on yours too, right, Nels? Yeah, so I don't know how long those are going to take to set
I'll try not to take it
up.
personally.
Okay, please, sorry. I just learned about all this, so we would have planned a little better ahead of time had I known. Nels?
Yeah, agenda item number 11, Nels Roteveld on Onyx Maps.
In the
Go ahead.
interest of time, I would just ask that you, vote to accept a donation of $3,270, which I'll detail in more, specific when I do my action item.
Right, donation from Onyx, right?
Next item, I think, is 14, action on solicitation of lease ODWC owned mineral interest in Beaver County building incomes. Yeah.
Don's gonna set me up here real quick. Unfortunately, Kristen couldn't be here today. The agenda item before this one was, to get a little more in-depth on our minerals program. But for the sake of time, we're gonna just jump to the agenda item there. We basically have, while Don's looking for it, we had a nomination for 4 parcels on our Beaver River Wildlife Management Area, total of 7.67 acres. CLO, Commissioner's Land Office, put our mineral nominations in with a batch of 31 others. So there was multiple state agencies that they oversee. So the price came in 50.53 to 57.39. And based on recommendation from our partners at CLO, we recommend that commission accept the bids for a total of $416.
I have a question, Bill. I have one question. When we lease minerals, I know this is a small tract, but in any others, do we have like depth clauses in there or anything do we have any special clauses that protect us or
Yeah,
limit them to?
Well, do you know the answer?
Yeah, we could, in next month, we're gonna push Kristen's agenda item back to next month. We'll be sure and get into a little more depth or discussion, if you will,
Okay.
about those kind of questions, so.
But I do know we use some fairly standard clauses in there that CLO always uses for their mineral leases as well. So that's the benefit of contracting out to CLO to kind of handle our mineral leases. And I know they do auditing of the royalty checks coming in to make sure we're paid what we're supposed to get paid and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that'd be
We'll
good.
find out. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all right in that price range, which actually is, one of the notes that I think we were gonna cover was that it was the high, within the high and the low from the last time these went out. So that 50.53 to 57.39 is considered by CLO fair market value, current market value, excuse me.
How long is the lease for?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, and this is just for the lease. If the company comes back and wants to drill, then we'll have to go through the whole stipulations with surface damages and everything else we do in our normal operations. Yep. Yep. I don't know that answer. Yeah, I don't believe this individual or this company is, because I didn't recognize that name, their name.
So looking for a motion if there aren't any other questions to accept.
Motion is second. Discussion? There being none, roll call.
Commissioner Brewster? Aye. Commissioner Barwick? Aye. Commissioner Gaddis? Aye. Commissioner Dillingham? Aye. Commissioner Mabry?
Aye. Thank you, Bill.
Jason. Now we can cut back to Jason.
Okay, Jason, you're back up.
Sorry, Jason, don't take it personally. Native non-game fish matter. We just
No
had to-
respect. Yeah, so hopefully you've kind of demonstrated, you know, that these fish sort of deserve being looked at, and that there's not much bow fishing management happening nationwide or in Oklahoma, although we've collected a little bit of interesting data. And so I wanted to kind of transition to the regulatory side, which, as I mentioned, is sort of one of the key ways that we can kind of mitigate this relationship between these sensitive non-game native species and, you know, the arrows from bow fishers, and with a goal to produce, to actually provide managed bow fisheries. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a fair question, and it was a little bit of serendipity. Like I said, we had that tournament, they hosted that tournament in summer 2018, and actually had an email from Bass Pro, and they're like, hey, would somebody from the wildlife department like to come set up a booth, an information booth? And I said, I'll do you one better, how about you let me collect some data? And they said, sure. And so then that kind of started the ball rolling, like I implied earlier. What do we do with these data? Let's look deeper in the literature. Holy cow, there's no literature. No one's managing bow fishing. And then that sort of initiated the mental need for more action. Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know how familiar you guys are with bow fishing regulations, but you don't really have to be, because there are none, virtually. All these native non-game species do not have bag limits, with the exception of black buffalo, which is a species of special concern. And alligator gar, of course, we have regulations, and paddlefish, we have regulations, but all the others, bigmouth buffalo, smallmouth buffalo, all the carp suckers, bowfin, etc., you can catch and keep as many as you want all day long. We basically have no prohibition of shoot and release. Now that's kind of, it's not something defined. You can shoot with bow fishing and throw the fish back. That's just a loophole in the law. It's legal. You can hook and line a fish and throw it back, which makes sense because you're generally not injuring the fish. We also have rules guiding disposal of remains. You know, bow fishing involves the shooting of fish with arrows, so there's going to be fish remains because you're shooting and killing fish. So really those three topics are really all that applied to bow fishing, other than certain spatial restrictions where you're not allowed to bow fish because of safety concerns or whatnot. But so it's this middle one that's sort of important for us today, because we have a rule proposal on the docket, which you're potentially familiar with. And it specifically prohibits the, quote, release of bowfish species, also speared fish, spear gun, gig, etc., all of which involve puncturing the body of a fish, which is intended to be a mortal activity. So we're proposing to prohibit the release of bowfish species, and that's founded based on several concepts. One, mutilation or wounding and abandonment of wildlife is currently prohibited already. It's considered wanton waste. That's sort of the vernacular for that. And then also maintaining possession and accountability of what we decide to shoot in Oklahoma is kind of important. We also have a proposed rule change which helps kind of provide guidance for legal disposal of fish remains, and that's not specific to bow fishing, but it applies here because it applies to bow fishers. We are proposing that we prohibit dumping of fish carcasses within 25 yards of an access point, simply to provide a more enjoyable experience for anyone using our waters, even if they're not fishing. So it's kind of important to ask, what is the word release? I have it in quotes because you can release a fish that's been shot with an arrow, but there is zero guarantee that fish is going to live. Yes, there's a possibility it lives, but it's completely different from hook and line angling because hook and line angling does not mortally wound fish. So release is simply the term being used, but it doesn't really describe what's happening. It's basically shooting and immediately discarding fish. Now the reason this is important is because down the road, 3 or 4 steps down the road, we've got research, local research on these native non-game species, and we discover, oh my God, they need conservation. They need bag limits. It could be one species, it could be multiple species, but right now, it's legal to simply shoot them and throw them back in the water. How do you hold someone to a bag limit if they can shoot fish and throw them back in the lake immediately? So that's sort of why this closes a loophole, and it's an important first step as far as management and conservation of some of these species. Now, it's based on some rationale, of course. I mean, I can come up here and preach ethics and stuff, but a lot of our activities are based on, principles espoused in the North American model of fish and wildlife conservation. And a couple of those tenets are as follows. Fish and wildlife are public resources, and they should not be killed for frivolous reasons. So if one were to go out and just simply shoot fish and throw them right back in the water, there's no beneficial use implied there. They're just shooting fish to kill them. So simply shooting public resources for fun doesn't really align with North American model. Also, sporting ethics, again, no pretense of beneficial use. They're not eating them, they're not fertilizing their garden with them, just throwing them back. So that's sort of the concepts that come to mind when I'm considering these rule changes. And I think it's important that we promote this conservation ethic because, we're teaching young children in Oklahoma how to shoot bows, how to shoot fish with bows and arrows, and we are teaching that in our program. So I think it's important that we make the commitment to actually live by that with our regulations. And so evidence from our work pretty much indicates bow fishing in Oklahoma, it can be done sustainably, but it requires a little bit more education and management. We can provide opportunities for native non-game species in a judicious way, and also opportunities for invasive species. And what we're trying to encourage, of course, is that anglers practice responsible sportsmanship and stewardship, taking responsibility for what they choose to shoot, knowing that they are killing it by shooting it, maintaining possession of that, and demonstrating beneficial use, and disposing of the animal remains in a legal and sensible way. And that's what these new regulations provide. Of course, this is only the first step in a long road towards managing bow fisheries in Oklahoma and nationwide. It requires a lot of life history research, a lot of which we have done to date on alligator gar and paddlefish, but those are only 2 species. Buffalo fishes, bowfin, and other gars are pretty important, and we're dedicated to looking at those in a little more depth. We need to monitor bow fishing harvest, and we need to match stock status with appropriate management regulations. So if we find through our research that certain species or certain stocks within lakes need conservation, then we need to be able to react to that. And of course, we need to provide and promote invasive species opportunities while we provide and promote managed bow fisheries for native non-game species in the same way we do with other game species, both terrestrial and aquatic. So it's they're public resources, and we want to have sound long-term public policy. So that's it, and I thank you for your time. It is. It's more effective in certain locations where you have higher water clarity or the fish are stacked up below a dam. But yes, we have rules guiding the bow fishing of paddlefish. Correct? Correct. I'm not ready to say anything like that. It depends on whether, it depends on whether regulation is warranted. Like I said, the first steps are, well, this first step is sort of closing a little loophole, which is gonna allow us to have bag limits someday if they're justified scientifically.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, what he's proposing is that, we require everybody else that's out there bow fishing to kind of do what tournament bow fishers do. You collect your harvest and bring it in so that you are able to identify the numbers and types that you have, whereas everybody else is out there, sticking it and throwing it back in the water, and you don't know how many they may have killed that day.
Yeah, and one of the things I didn't forget, Barry, one of the things Barry wanted me to talk about was how this relates to what other states are doing and how they're regulating bow fishing and release. And it's not fully clear, what states allow this catch and release in bow fishing, but I know that in certain states, bow fishers want this, and they're petitioning for this because it allows them to, well, they have different justifications for it, but it provides them a means to discard the fish at their convenience. Well, it's a bigger issue than that, I think, and so just based on what I've said today, I think it's a justified regulation change. It does not cause our bow fishers any harm, but it provides a mechanism for more effective management in the future. Yeah.
So, anecdotally, I've not had any bow fishermen approach us about, increasing regulations on this. Have you gone through the comments that came in yet, just to kind of get a glimpse of what kind of feedback you got from I would imagine those comments are mostly coming from people that are kind of active in bow fishing. Are they clamoring for it, or?
No.
No, I didn't.
No.
I thought my sense of it was they were pushing back pretty hard on the proposal, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some of it was potentially,
Confusion.
yeah,
I think there's a
saying
lot of
confusion
confusion.
is a good word, and that's why, if you'll refer to the article in the Outdoor Oklahoma magazine, we're trying to get ahead of that and describe to them, why this movement is happening, why conservation of these species is important, and hopefully, get some of the facts out there. And, it's early, and this is just closing one loophole, but yes, there was a little bit of pushback in the comments.
Wade, and would you mind grabbing a mic, because I just got a text reminder that people watching the live stream can't hear anything unless you've got a mic.
Yes, I can hear you, Wade.
I mentioned this with Barry, but it may be an unintended consequence. So now I can shoot and release my fish. I tub them, keep them. I can go 25 yards from the boat dock, tub them. So I would be for 100 yards. 5 yards is not very far from a dock.
Yeah, these were, like I said, these were two separate regulations which do sort of overlap slightly, and the fish disposal rule had various other justifications factored in, and that went through a review process in Fish Division. We originally had a farther distance, and it got whittled down based on the desires of Fish Division.
Yeah, for a guy that has had problems getting my truck.
Yeah.
And then, I guess when the bow hunting trip is over, I can just.
Yes, and that provides the mechanism for our law enforcement to check people for their harvest.
We realize that this is a process,
Mike.
and
We realize that this is a process, and Jason, in one of his slides, I mean, the very first piece of this puzzle is to collect the data sets. We know what's going on out there, and some of this stuff we're kind of jumping to conclusions. But another big part of it, I've already joked with Nels and Micah a little bit. It's just not really a joke, but a social media campaign at some point. Bow fishers in the know, don't shoot old buffalo or something. We can come up with some sort of a social media campaign, and that's going to be a part of it. You know, Commissioner, I thought about that too. And, you know, when I'm duck hunting in, you know, the morning in low light, I have to be able to identify every one of those ducks, you know, so I don't shoot over my limit. So, I mean, at some point, there's got to be a little responsibility. So it's a tough one. Yeah.
Don't have an accurate number of that.
Got to get a mic. Sorry.
Don't have an accurate number of that at this point. However, we're interested in knowing that, and we did fall out as far as our survey on the high end of the spectrum compared to other states for the estimate in the number of bow fishing tournaments.
Jason, good information. Thank you for sharing it. If we could, Rhonda, I guess this goes maybe to you, but get a draft of the regulatory changes or proposals out well in advance of next month's meeting if we're going to be voting on it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think sustainability certainly probably the big key on this, and I would think that the bow hunting community would be behind, you know, the sustainability issue. And so I think there's always unknown, unintended consequences out of actions like this that we can't foresee right now, and, you know, it's going to have to be fluid. But the sustainability piece is, you know, I think something that, you know, all of them would support, I would hope.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, we understand the questions, and I mean, these are real concerns, but when you get the rules, Rhonda sends those out, holler if you have questions. We'll be glad to try to address that.
Yeah, and the Rules Committee meeting will be meeting, as I mentioned, my mic won't turn on, February 9th, I believe. Is that the date? Yeah, so the committee will get together, consider the proposals and all the comments and staff input and all that stuff as well ahead of time. But yes, everybody will get the proposals ahead of time if they haven't already, I guess. No? All right.
Thanks for your time, and thanks to Jason. Great job.
Good job, Jason.
You know, one thing I think you gotta be careful, I mean, if we're gonna be one of the first states to ever institute any bow fishing rules, we may be the first states that's excluded from bow fishing tournaments throughout the United States. So I think it's important that we work with these tournament officials that conduct these tournaments to make sure that we can work through some of these issues. So, very good. Thank you, Jason.
I think we need to go
Next
back to
item
11.
What's it?
Back to 11 if we can.
Yeah. Back to Nels. Nels Rodefield on the Onyx Maps activity. Go ahead.
Commissioners, Onyx is a company that produces a computer program. Some of you may be familiar with it. Most people use it on their phone, but it shows land ownership by an aerial photograph and property boundaries. And under an agreement with them, they provided us with a 25% discount code for our sportsmen, which we promoted to them through primarily email marketing. And then for every purchase that was made using that discount code, Onyx donated $5 to the Wildlife Department, which is where we came up with the $3,270, which y'all voted to accept. We really felt like this was a win-win. It's a product that helps hunters go more, do more, be better at where they're going, and it raised money for our efforts. And as as Michael will tell you, that this Onyx, agreement was not the only agreement that we, undertook this year. In way of introduction, before I get, to Michael Bergen, I would just want to point out a couple quick things. Marketing and sales are not synonymous, for us. There is a difference there. We're a trust management agency, meaning we manage fish and wildlife in the public trust, and sometimes the things that we do in terms of marketing aren't really about sales. Promoting antlerless harvest, for example, especially when we're talking about getting lifetime license holders to shoot does, that's not about a sales transaction. It's about a management decision and about a management effort. Similarly, getting people to donate deer to the Hunters Against Hunger program, that's something that we worked on this year as well. That's one where that actually costs the department money, but it's something that we want to do, and so we do it using our marketing means and methods. And the other thing I would like to point out is that we've had some really good administrative support for our marketing. JD and Wade have been, and previous administrations and previous commissioners have been supportive of our approach to marketing. We have a very adaptable team. We didn't create a new FTE, we reallocated one about 6 years ago to this cause, if you will, just like we have done recently with some of our 3 hunting and fishing coordinators. But the adaptability is critical, and I want to introduce Michael Bergen. Michael's a senior information and education specialist. He came to us, he was a newspaper man in Shawnee, has a mass comm degree with a minor in marketing. And he came to us 14 years ago to work on the magazine and work on news releases, and we were able to create and carve out a full-time dedicated position 6 years ago for the purpose of marketing. And with that, Michael, I'll turn
Hey,
it over.
Nels, real quick. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is this roll out to all the other states too?
The Onyx agreement is available. They're interested.
They offer the same type of
States, yeah,
Yes.
we weren't the only state to do the Onyx. Some have jumped at it, and some are considering it, and we were one of the ones that
I got a question too, but do you?
Nels had a question. I've been part of that Onyx hunts probably since its inception, and I know they have different levels of participation. You get like the platinum level and premium level. So if you get a $5 donation, if you receive a $5 donation for every person that signs up for it, I don't know whether you have it, but to me it should be, maybe if they take the entry level participation is $5, if they want the premium, we should get $7.50 or $10. And then the other thing is on renewals. If they just pay up front $5 and that's it, because this is an annual subscription to Onyx Hunt, so I pay $100 every year, we ought to be able to pick up some additional revenue as a result of that. So it's kind of a question.
Yeah, Commissioner, I can address that actually. There's various structures that they're trying with different states. We are one of just the first few that they've gotten off the ground, but in some of the states they have tried things like connecting it to their Refer a Friend program, where if an existing hunter brings in another hunter, both of them can get a coupon. There's various structures, and in fact, you mentioned that depending on the level of membership that they subscribe to should have an impact on what the donation to us is. It is actually like that. I think Nels mentioned that it was $5, but we actually had the same offer on a more expensive subscription with Onyx that actually yielded a little bit higher than $5 on those particular ones. So in effect, that is taking place, and the great thing about it is the folks at Onyx are very open to all of this discussion. They want to be involved in the ways that that states can work. They know that we all have various legal structures and different things we can do in our capacities, and so they're open to that. And so we hope to do more projects with them. We haven't addressed what happens with renewals and things like that. That's not come up, but that's definitely a good one to bring up to them, and they may be very open to that, so.
So bef-
An Onyx subscription, I believe, is generally 1 year.
yes.
So the $5 is just the initial.
Well, yeah, in our existing relationship with them, we only got the $5 for the first subscription.
But we were also only on the hook to do this one-time blast to promote it too,
Correct.
right? So, I mean, if they like that promotion, want to do more, presumably they'll come back to the table and we'll talk about what do we do if we have a second round. Yeah, no, I think we're done promoting as of now, right? Yeah.
We are. A big part of this is the industry is realizing that wildlife agencies' audiences are very valuable. You know, we are connected with hundreds of thousands of the people that they want to sell their product to. And, you know, so in some ways they're dependent upon us, they're dependent upon, you know, the regulations and things that we're making and doing every day and the habitat work that we're doing. And we're dependent upon them to engage customers with good products and things like that. And so collectively, I think that more and more of, I guess you could say, industry partners want to have access to our audience. And so we have to guard that and be careful with that, and we definitely have leverage there. So look forward to the opportunity to explore more of that with OnX. Of course, this...
Hey, Michael,
Yes, sir.
before you transition to agenda item 12, which I'll point out is where we're going now in the agenda, but I just want to underscore what Nell said to set this up too, though, that our marketing is not about the almighty dollar at the end of the day. It's got to have a benefit to our trust responsibility to manage and fish and wildlife and promote hunting and fishing and get more people engaged in it as well. So that was something, you know, that went into the decision making, you know, here at the very beginning of the process. This wasn't just to make money off helping OnX sell its subscriptions, but also to get people more and more plugged into how to find ways to hunt and fish as a result of that service too. So, and then you mentioned $5 generated the 3,000 that was just accepted in donations. What generated the 6,000 plus Go Outdoor Oklahoma money?
When we send emails to our constituency, we put calls to action further down in the email, things like download our app, go to gooutdoorsoklahoma.com today and get your license, things like that. So when a customer gets the offer and they see, you know, hey, our friends at OnX want to pass this offer on to you, but they scroll onto the bottom of their email, well, they'll see additional marketing that we've hidden in there that's, you know, inviting them to log in. And when they do that, they're right there where our online shop is, and they can buy merchandise and they can buy licenses and things like that. So they start spending money within the Go Outdoor system. And when they do that, we can track that. I've put a marker, so to speak, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but put a marker on every email so I can see additional revenue that's come from people who have opened those emails, read them, and then clicked somewhere in that and then spent money.
Yeah, so to the earlier point, the OnX marketing helped us generate even twice as much and bringing people to our license portal and looking at regulations and shopping and everything else, right? Yeah.
And of course, when sportsmen buy a license, that's worth federal dollars as well, and certifications and the whole bit. So it's kind of just a big machine. And so the more partnerships like that we can have, the more relevant, the more speaking into the, I guess you could say, the overall hunting and fishing conversation being held out there by our constituents, the more we're speaking into that, the more we're bringing something to the table, the more our messages, I think, get absorbed by our constituents and the more impact we have, I think. So more public trust we have, and also things like revenue and other things. You had mentioned that we're not about the almighty dollar necessarily with marketing, and so we'll cover some of that today. I do want to start by saying, though, yes, sir.
I think we might want to move Scott. He's been here sitting here patiently this whole meeting.
Sure.
So if we could bump Scott up and then you could come back.
Absolutely.
Scott, is that all right? I'm sure. So if you'd like to go ahead and maybe address, Bill.
So I'm clear, we're jumping down to 15?
Yeah, 15.
Okay. Well, real briefly, Scott came and visited with us in June to talk about the feral hog eradication pilot program they started. Today, he's going to give us an update on that.
an update hopefully on new grant funding, whether they got that or not. And then the third thing I asked Scott to talk about is the toxicants, if he has any update for us. So, Scott?
Well, it's good to be back here. I like hanging out over at this place. You know, feral swine is an issue that it's kind of an uphill battle, but we're doing really well. With the 2018 Farm Bill money, we finally got it implemented in 20, and we have two projects. One's called the Red River Project, which is Cotton, Tillman, Jackson, Harmon counties, where we're really trying to put a squeeze effort on pigs. We're also doing K County. I can update you on the Red River here is that as of right now, we have 176,000 acres under control effort. People have signed up and letting us work. Now, as of last week, we'd removed roughly 5,000 pigs. We're flying in cotton today, so that number will go up hopefully another 1,000 this week if we have a good week. And we've also had over $500,000 reported in damage off of those properties. And a big part of this Farm Bill project is not only just wiping pigs out, but trying to get a grasp for how much they're actually costing the landowners. And we've got a pretty extensive survey form out there where we try to gather damage data. And then what we really want to see is next year, if that number starts going down, are we actually reducing damage? You know, what I'd like, there's a big argument within USDA as to what data we gather, but I think what we're headed for is to show, you know, if we kill 60,000 pigs, you know, we've reduced the future population by X. And how much damage would that have cost the landowners as we slowly try to wipe them out? K County is kind of a different little story up there. Pigs are a whole lot more popular where they're newer to everybody. There's a lot of interest from north of the border in coming to Oklahoma and hunting pigs, whereas a lot of our landowners are leasing out property rights, not just for deer hunting, but also for pig hunters. So they're a little more hesitant in letting us come in. We have 61,000 acres under agreement. A ton of that, though, is Corps of Engineer land around Call Lake. And then we've only removed about 350 head. Now, we flew last week, so I don't have the new numbers. We may be up closer to 500 head of pigs out of K County, but most all that's just around Call Lake. And we've had a little over $330,000 in damage reported from K County. Now, there was some money left over in the Farm Bill, so we decided to expand our projects. And Oklahoma, fortunately, was awarded some more funding. So what we've done was we tied in Osage and Pawnee counties as they join K, and we can expand on that project up there. And I don't have acres signed up yet. I know in Osage it's pretty good, though. We're probably close to 100,000. I think 96,000 was what I just got texted to me, roughly. And 2 weeks ago, we killed over 1,000 with a helicopter up there in Osage County. So we had a really good week. Then also, we've added Roger Mills and Beckham counties to the stuff out west. And we've had some really good days in Roger Mills flying. I mean, a lot of the guys were a little bit hesitant at adding those counties to that project. They won't know why we did it, and I had to kind of explain to them it's just part of the bigger footprint. We're just trying to make a bigger footprint. But the numbers out there really, I think we had one day in Roger Mills where we took over 500 with a helicopter, and nobody really expected it. So our numbers are really high, even in places where you don't think there's that many. And on another note, I'll say that in calendar year 2020, we upped our take by 40% in Oklahoma, what our guys did. We went from 14,000 in 19, which now 19 was we had a 35-day furlough. It really slowed us down at the first of the year. But, you know, we were like 14,000 head what we removed. But in 2020, we were up to 21,000. And that's 35 guys removed all those pigs themselves. And where we can give most of the credit to is the implementation of, we've got 60 of these remote fired traps now in the state. And that technology and that ability, along with with less pressure on the pigs,
just feed them and they'll come, we really removing a lot of hogs. We just got into some here south of town. I don't know, I guess we removed probably 60 some odd head out of there just right here in the city. And, it's kind of weird, we didn't know there was any pigs in there. The one guy said, yeah, I've seen some rooting in there. It was a sod farm. And first night we caught 47, it averaged over 250 pounds apiece. It's kind of strange, there's no reproduction, there was no small ones in there. They're just all huge pigs. But, we pre-baited them for a week and they just come right on in the trap, so it worked out. Bill wanted me to update y'all. I know everybody saw the article, or I say everybody saw it, but I assume everybody's heard about it. The article last week concerning sodium nitrite on Facebook. My phone number is public because it has rang off the hook concerning that area. Sodium nitrite has been used in Australia with great success. The thing about Australia that's different in the U.S. is that in Australia, everything that could eat this is a non-native invasive species. They have no issues with the native stuff consuming the bait. Whereas here, that's our biggest hurdle, is trying to find a bait and trying to find a delivery system that will minimize the risk to native species. And NWRC in Fort Collins, they've been around the world with this, trying to find some kind of bait or some kind of delivery system that will primarily, specifically target pigs. And the first shot at this was bait. And they developed a bait. It was like a big range cube, and there was grain in it. And the sodium nitrite is real finicky. In the open air, it dissipates. It just leaves you. So we had to find a way to encapsulate it and stay in the bait. Well, they developed a bait. It was a big cube, about so big around, and but had grain in it. Well, as the pigs would eat that bait, there'd be grain spillage out of their mouths. And then what happened was in the field trials, we started noticing birds, primarily songbirds, consuming this bait. And what we found out was sodium nitrite's an excellent bird toxicant because, in 10 minutes they were gone. And so we had to back up. And I don't know if you're familiar with the stuff, it's called Nutella. It's got paste-like bait. Well, we come up with a paste bait. It reminds me of Nutella. And a paste bait that's not as near, it's not as attractive to birds, and the pigs still eat it good. And so last year we had our first trials in the summer, late summer, in Alabama and Texas, and with this paste bait and a new delivery system. And I can say that 96% of the pigs that fed on that bait were killed. So the success was through the roof. And spring trials start again in April here in the same spots, Alabama and Texas. That'll be the spring trials. And once those trials go through, it'll all be submitted to the EPA for registration. And what we've come up with now is it's a new bait delivery system. It's a box. And the problem is coming up with a box that is bear-proof. We can keep most everything else out of that box, but a bear makes it difficult. So what they've come up with a system now where basically you can use a game camera or a cell phone type camera to transmit to you. And when you have the hogs at the bait station, you can open the doors with a button. Unlock, open, let them feed, and then shut the doors when they're done. And we think that's going to be the ticket, particularly where bears can be an issue. And I don't know how many of you have ever worked with bears, but there's not much you can keep them out of. I ain't found anything yet you can keep them out of when he really wants to get in it. But that'll be the ticket. And I think people are getting their hopes up, we can go to the feed store, buy this, throw it out, and kill a bunch of pigs. Well, that's not exactly going to be the case, because to follow the label, you're going to have the bait distribution system, with non-targets in mind. And and I think also that'll help, because some of the worries, some of the pushback against toxicants is that very thing, the distribution of bait and how it's done. And this way, it's going to be pretty much pig targeted. And the other good thing about sodium nitrite is when the warfarin-based baits come out, they were approved. I've never seen EPA approve something so quick. Well, the deal was that product had already been tested
in Louisiana for nutria. So they just took those tests, swapped the target animal to pigs, and EPA just reapproved it. And warfarin stays in the system for a long time. I mean, it passes on to other species, whereas sodium nitrite, it never leaves the gut of the pigs, and in a short time, it dissipates. And so what we've seen is whatever feeds on those dead pigs, there's no issue. And you could say the same even if people want to eat those carcasses, there's no threat to you, because it stays within that gut system. And so hopefully we'll make some progress this year with sodium nitrite. At least, I don't know how it's going to look in the end. It may look in the end where it's only us that puts it out. I don't know yet, because there's a lot of concern over the bait distribution and non-targets. But we'll see. And then, they're already making, Congress is working on the next farm bill, which is 2023. So pigs are already mentioned there. And hopefully, then the next farm bill, right now the farm bill money is divided 50-50 between APHIS and NRCS. We kind of told them that with that kind of amount of money, what NRCS is doing, we could better spend that money in the field killing pigs than having workshops. So what we're trying to do is change that distribution, maybe 75-25, and help us. I mean, so far now, a year ago, I had 1 helicopter and 2 pilots. Now I've got 3 helicopters and 2 pilots. Still trying to get another pilot hired. But I've also, because the U.S. Army is getting rid of this training platform, I'm picking up a 4th helicopter next month. And basically we'll have 1 when another one's in a shop, because typically out of 3, one of them's always in maintenance. So our goal is to get to where we have 3 in the field all year long. And some parts of the state, like the southeast, the helicopter is pretty useless after mid-March because of the leaves. But out west and some of the stuff in the north central, we can fly pretty much year round. And that's what we're trying to get at anyway. But if anybody's got any questions.
Have you moved into Harmon in Jackson County yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you looking for shooters?
I've got a list that long of potential shooters. We're purchasing them, but we're getting them at a rate of $180,000 a piece, which is nothing, because the ones they're selling on auction are going for over $500,000. But they worked a deal out with us, and APHIS has a rule about how many aircraft they can buy a year, so we had to kind of get around that. But the last batch is fixing to come out, so we're going to go ahead and get 1 more while we can. But do they help you? We are getting a big parts package from them. Yeah.
Scott, I remember when you were here last time, you talked about if you started with 2 sow and a piglet, in 30 years you'd have 102,000. So I know when you eradicate these hogs in an area, you've got to have a plan to go back and start over the next year. Is that kind of the plan you have?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and and it's a weird thing. You spend more money cleaning up than you do at the front end. We always say the last 10% will eat up 90% of your budget. And it's kind of how it works. But I tell you what, the advent of these remote fired traps has been all the difference in the world, because one man can run traps in 2 counties, and
I know that trap that Eric Cowan, he had on our place, the boar buster trap's a good trap, but the one that, I think it came out of San Antonio, Texas or something. I mean, that trap really works. And how many of those traps do you all have in the state?
Like that particular trap, we have about 6 of those.
Yeah, because they really work.
Yeah, and then, we've got a bunch. We got 2 or 3 different kinds, but what we found is that we like to put multiple gates on a trap. If the whole trap don't drop, we use multiple gates.
Yeah.
Anywhere from 2 to 4 gates, and just the less trouble you give them, the easier they are to train. And but you always have those few that don't trust a trap, and actually we're doing a lot of cleanup with a helicopter, not in big bunches of pigs, but just going after them ones we can't catch.
Right.
We'll go run them down and get rid of them that way.
Any other questions of Scott? Jim?
You know, I'm gonna give you an average number because it varies by trap. But for a trap and camera, we're spending around $8,000. Uh-huh. Yeah, and then you pay, it depends on your provider, but I mean, you've got your web fees, and they're gonna run about $2,000 a year.
Scott, are there any counties left in Oklahoma that are not, infiltrated by, feral?
You know, the Panhandle has very few, but I'm not gonna say it's devoid because we just found a couple pigs and killed them the other day that, for a while there, all three counties were clean. Now, what we've noticed is Woodward's really getting hit pretty hard. We're catching a ton of pigs in Woodward, but hopefully we're keeping them beat down. I don't think Alfalfa has any pigs right now that we know of, but it's very few counties, just 3 or 4 is about all that don't have pigs, to some degree.
You don't have them, just wait.
2 kinds of land. 2 kinds of landowners. Them that's got pigs, them that's hadn't got, or how is it? Them that's got pigs, them that's about to get them.
Yeah, right.
Well, as a landowner in Alfalfa County, I'd appreciate you keeping them out.
We're trying.
Any other questions? Being none, thank you, Scott.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Scott.
your presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, Nels, you guys are back up again.
Okay. I do appreciate y'all's comments and questions about the Onyx partnership, and hopefully I can share a little bit more about some other things we're doing these days in the way of marketing. Of course, it is true that we have significantly ramped up marketing efforts in the last several years, but especially in the last 2 or 3 since we have launched our Go Outdoors Oklahoma online license system. That's in part because it's not just a sales platform, but it's a marketing tool. It's a complete customer management system that allows us to target, understand, and reach our customers very effectively, very quickly. And so there's a lot of things we're able to do now that just a few years ago we could only talk about or maybe not even think about. We didn't even know opportunities existed that we can do now. And so I'm going to share a few of those things here in a minute. But what I would say initially is that in Oklahoma, our approach to marketing is focused on hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation. In our field, most of us know that's referred to as R3. Among wildlife state agency marketers and communication specialists, it's R3 topic is one of the most pressing discussions of our time. And that's in part because it's not so easy anymore for people to get out and hunt and fish. It's not like kids come home from school as frequently and grab a shotgun and go up the road and shoot rabbits, and therefore adopt a hunting and fishing culture that just stays with them forever. It takes more concerted effort to get people to hunt and fish. Not only does it take more concerted effort, but it actually, it takes, and there's research to support this, in general, when people become a hunter and an angler, it takes repetitive exposure to the outdoors, multiple experiences before someone actually tends to self-identify as a hunter or an angler who's actually capable of sharing their heritage. But that's exactly what we need people to do. That's the way that hunting and fishing and our traditions have spread through the decades, is generally, at least according to the research we have available to us now, is generally it's a mentorship-driven activity. When people hunt and fish avidly themselves, they share it with those around them, whether that's their children or their grandchildren or their family members. And then research says that the more avid these young people become at hunting and fishing, the more likely they are to become a long-term user. And so all of this basically informs us that we need to spend a lot of time talking to our existing customers. They're the ones who have the ability to help us recruit more hunters and anglers. An old marketing adage is basically just the easiest customer to get is the one that you already have. So by all means, don't lose them. It is good to make new customers, but your new customers can or your existing customers, excuse me, can advocate for you, can can share, share your product or share your services. In our case, our existing hunters and anglers are the ones who pass it on to the next generation. Those are my two boys, and they're not going to have any problem having access to hunting and fishing because I have had an avid hunting and fishing lifestyle my whole life. So you can see that's how it works. Research says this is how it works broad scale. And so, we're constantly looking for ways to communicate with existing customers. As part of our strategic planning process that we've been through over the last couple of years, we decided that we would use a digital marketing strategy initially to reach customers where they're at. That tends to be online these days. And in addition to that, digital platforms are, for lack of a better way to put it, they're very efficient and you can evaluate your efforts very quickly. It's not the only approach to marketing, it's just one that is a good starting point for a group like us who is just beginning to learn and have access to tools that can do some of these things. Research also tells us that part of becoming a hunter and angler is having a lot of support while you're learning, while you're going, whether that's from your mentor, whether that's from a community of hunters and anglers around you, from the industry, such as Onyx partnerships and things like that, things that actually make it easier to access the outdoors, game laws that actually make sense and that are easy to follow. All of these things support customers in their journey as a sportsman. And so that has kind of become, one of the top priorities for us in marketing for the ODWC. Of course, in 2020, which is really where we're going to focus for the next few minutes, supporting customers has meant making sure that they know that they can enjoy the outdoors in the midst of a pandemic that has had many people's recreational choices stripped away from them. Many people were finding out in early 2020 that their ball seasons were canceled, their dance studios were closed, the movies were closed. There's nothing to go do. And so we worked with the Department of Health to craft messaging to let people know that we would safely advocate that you should and can use the outdoors. You can use our areas that are open, hunting and fishing are open, and we provided general Department of Health tips for how they can go and do that. And it was perfect timing because all over the country there was basically a massive inflow of hunters and anglers into the outdoors. All over the country we saw this, and so this campaign was well timed and it was kind of put together in a hurry, but it basically it consisted of a lot of digital material that taught people how to go outdoors, things that they could do. We produced a bunch of videos and social media posts and emails that encouraged activity, invited people to buy a license, asked them to try the outdoors and to give it a go. And we put a lot of content together to help people who were managing kids at home suddenly and whatnot, and put together a lot of educational material that helped people actually go out and do these things. Of course, this was one of the emails we sent to people, but we did dozens of pieces. And it was actually very effective, I think, in supporting customers. We would never have been able to support the influx of hunters and anglers that we had in 2020 with our old license system. Our new license system was able to accommodate people coming to buy, and it also gave us tools to communicate with these people in new ways. So that was a very important message that we ran in 2020. But it was part of a larger digital content strategy that we developed in the strategic planning committee that I was on, where we said, okay, we're going to focus on digital content, and we're going to begin reaching hunters and anglers in a more targeted way. We revamped our email program, I guess you could say, to where we were strictly sending, or we began strictly sending hunting-related content to hunters and fishing-related content to anglers. Occasionally we'd cross them over. The result of that in our minds is that you're sending more relevant, but possibly slightly less frequent information to people, but it matters more to the people that get it. If you are a hunter and not an angler, but you get an email about angling, you might read it, but you also might decide that you're just going to stop paying attention to the subject lines that come from the Wildlife Department altogether. So we began a process of targeting these people better. We saw an immediate increase in open rates. And then we also created a digital online platform for content, our Outdoor Oklahoma Journal, which is essentially a blog, where we've started putting all kinds of content that help people go out and be a hunter and an angler. It's that continuation with support that research tells us hunters have to have if they're going to continue and become an avid hunter and angler, a long-term user. You can go onto our Outdoor Oklahoma Journal and find all kinds of the stuff we've done for years: quality writing, quality news, quality video, how-to information. You can learn to work on your bow. You can learn to tie knots. There's a lot on there, and it's only going to keep growing as we go. So we leveraged our emails with these blogs, and essentially our emails could have more information in them, but they were less lengthy. But by leveraging this content, we could link to it, and people could spend more time on our website when they check their emails. And we also saw that when we would send these emails that link to our blog, these pages automatically had significant jumps in traffic. We also were able to, spend more time sending this information via text message. I'm going to share with you a couple of examples. Nels mentioned earlier that not every project with marketing is about driving sales, and that's true. For example, our agency decided this year we wanted to see an increase in antlerless harvest, and so in marketing we asked how we could help and come alongside them and support that. And so we created a landing page on our Outdoor Oklahoma Journal. It had video content, articles, how-to information, blogs written by some of our big game experts and whatnot. And we leveraged that with email, and we basically were able to do a campaign that reached existing deer hunters, because antlerless harvest is one of those things where anyone and everyone can come try it, but for example, holiday antlerless season, which is later in the year, is one of those things that might be on the minds of deer hunters, but maybe not something that they would do. But by telling them that it's it's a priority, asking them and inviting them to be a part of that, I think we were able to come in and help support that goal of the Wildlife Division. We did see an increase in antlerless harvest, and we saw an increase in the sale of holiday antlerless licenses. I think it was a 34% increase in those license sales. And so this was just a small effort that was a part of supporting that effort. Again, it wasn't about driving sales, but it did manage to, I think. So another example of just something we do every day is we send emails out about the opening of our various hunting seasons. In this case here, we did an email campaign where we let those interested in hunting know that the deer season was upon us. We used email, text messaging, and our online blog, and we were able to see a click-through revenue of $35,000 from that effort. Now, when I say we're able to see a click-through revenue of $35,000, that just means that we're able to see that people read the email, clicked on the link to buy within the email, and went on to purchase something. Now, clearly, these emails were informative and helpful to a much broader range of hunters, but we haven't historically used our emails for actually driving revenue, for getting someone to click and purchase right then and there. That's sort of a product of our new system that allows us to do that and kind of see the impact that those emails can actually have. We've sent emails for decades letting people know that the opening day of deer season is here, but we can do more in the way of inviting them to engage with our system right away. We can put things in there like the Onyx offer, and we did that many times this year. And there's also, a range of other helpful information in these emails that we send to people. So it's just sort of a brief framing of the way that we use our emails. Another example here is, a lot of these were just simply targets of opportunity. Some of you may remember our old wildlife habitat patches that we sold decades ago. We had hundreds of these left over in our warehouse. Essentially, these stopped being a cool thing about 10 or 15 years ago. People stopped buying them. Not only that, it's hard to sell them. It was hard to sell them on our old system. But we were able to use our new system because there's an online merchandise shop and we can access customers quickly. We were able to work with our license section to put this inventory that we literally had in our warehouse for decades into an online shop and then rebrand these things so that we were able to kind of call them a vintage piece of Oklahoma wildlife history. And we immediately helped make those things popular again. And these things that we've had in our warehouse since the 80s started flying off of our shelves again. And in the year, we sold $14,000 in revenue off of these things. So, you know, this is all just new things that we can do with our system, whereas previously, if someone wanted to buy a habitat patch, they would have had to either come to our glass window here at our office, or they would have had to download an order form and send in a check, and just stuff that people don't do anymore. But when you can put it right in front of them and it just says, click here to buy, and then we have tools to track that, it suddenly opens the possibility for a lot of new opportunities that, you know, we wouldn't have probably sold those habitat patches. They'd still be in our warehouse. And so that's a good example of something we've been able to do. Now, I'm talking so far about existing customers and the way that we communicate with them, but I don't want to let that override the importance of reaching new customers, casting a wide net, making sure that we're bringing new people into what we call the top of the marketing funnel, or you know, bringing them in as new leads and educating them about hunting and fishing and encouraging them to try hunting and fishing. So we work with our Brant. When I say Brant, that's our, I think all of us know, but that is our licensed vendor partner who owns and produces the Go Outdoors Oklahoma license system. But through our relationship with them, we are able to contract with marketing firms that let us put a lot of ads on social media. There's a very sophisticated system that lets us weed out our customers, but still use our customers as a way to identify lookalikes who use social media, who we think, or who the algorithm thinks could become our customers. And we can put ads in front of them that invite them to buy a license and invite them into following us on social media and whatnot. And so we started doing this this year, or actually we started in 2019, and in 2020 we marked 1 year of running these ads. And that gives us year-over-year data. We can put ads in front of customers that are likely to be our customers, and these are people that have either not ever been a customer or who have not been a customer in our system in the last 12 months. And so it finds these people and puts an ad in front of them, and because they look like our existing customers, we're effectively able to reach them. And people do respond to these ads, believe it or not. You put these on social media in front of the right crowds, they buy licenses, and then they begin to get our emails, and they begin to communicate with us, and we begin to treat them like existing customers, and hopefully, you know, help them become avid anglers and hunters as well. We have real-time data dashboards that let us look at how effective these are, and basically, this has been a surprise success for us. We've had 14 versions of ads that we used in 2020, including a slate of influencer videos. We worked with Blake Shelton. We worked with the popular outdoor media company Meat Eater to produce some of these ads. We have worked with some sort of local celebrities, Tess Monty with News on 6 out of Tulsa, and we have plans to work with more country music stars that you know, we've already started working with Megan Patrick, and then also some professional athletes that are natives of Oklahoma. And again, you don't think about it, but when you put these influencers in front of people that are talking about the outdoor lifestyle, it entices people, and people do respond to these ads. These have been successful. Again, the benefit of having a digital presence is this is where our likely customers are spending their time. And we also can evaluate these in real time and decide how effective and how worthwhile they are. If an ad isn't working, we can pull it. If it is working, we can create another one that's like it, but that's got a fresher face and that's newer. When you produce ads and when you are on social media inviting people to come and be a hunter or an angler, that's not free. There's a cost associated with it. So how do we pay for these? You know, much of it is just part of our relationship or part of our contract with Brant. There's services that they're able to help us do as part of the scope of their work, but there's also additional costs. You all have seen the durable license hard cards that the agency sells, and these are the newest designs. These actually just launched today. But this is actually a product of Brant, and they basically donate or designate $1 from the sale of every one of these cards into what's called their Oklahoma Marketing Fund, which is a fund that they manage on our behalf that's strictly to be used for digital online marketing. So we're able to partner with them on additional projects based on these sales, And then also, our agency contributes to this fund. And then in addition to that, we've got several grants that have helped fund some of these ads, particularly through the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, the Archery Trade Association, the Association for Conservation Information. All of these groups are grants that are targeting the recruitment and retention of hunters and anglers. And so when we say to these groups that we want to do projects like this, they give us money to go and do these things. And so it's been a success, but this hard card program has been part of that. In 2020, we sold over 66,000 of these. And again, $1 for every one of those went into that marketing fund. With our emails, with our digital ads, with the automated emails that the Brandt system sends, such as renewal notices and things like that to customers to let them know that their licenses are expiring and whatnot. Through all of this, we're able to track these efforts. In 2020, the emails that I showed you earlier had a click-through revenue of over $221,000. And again, that's just people who have clicked on the actual buy button within their email. You know, many of these people go on to still buy their license, and the email had an influence, but we can actually track who clicked on the button in the email. Automated emails drove over $872,000, and again, those were things like renewal notices that let people know their licenses are about to expire and whatnot. And that's something that's marketing, but we don't have to have our hands on it. It just happens. It's part of the system, and we're fixing to do a whole lot more of these automated emails with our licensing partner. They've got over 90 new pieces of email content and text messages and other materials that they're going to start using to communicate with existing customers, and that's effectively hands-off. Once we're able to edit and make sure it all looks good and it's the right kind of content for our customers and we put it into play, we'll set into motion a bunch of communication pieces that just happen automatically. The digital ads, click-through, view-through revenue of that was, for 2020, was over $1.5 million. And when I say click-through revenue and view-through revenue, that means people who saw one of our ads, that we know saw one of our ads, and then went on to either click and buy, or that we were able to track that they bought later. Now, if you're like me, you're a skeptic, and you see that and you say, well, when you're showing ads to people on social media and then they go buy a license, how can you be sure that your ad had any influence and that your money was well spent? That's a fair question, and I ask that as aggressively as anybody because I want this stuff to work, and so does our Brandt Information Services who partners with us on these efforts. And so this is, when we say we had an ROI or a return on ad spend or a return on investment of $13.22 for every dollar spent on these ads, what we're saying is that's how the marketing industry would look at it. You can actually be much more aggressive and take a closer look at what you can say. We know for sure that a certain number of people bought after seeing an ad, but how many of them bought because of our ad? And it's a system of breaking it down and getting a better look at who the people are, how we would have come across them, and how we got their revenue. And when you look at it like that, it's still to the tune of about, I think it's $3 for every dollar spent. So even if you want to be just super aggressive like I like to do, we're still getting a significant return on our investment of that. I like to share that because I want people to know that it matters to me that these work and that I wouldn't just pitch these high numbers anyway. I want everyone to know that we can look at this pretty meticulously. Through the Brandt Information Services platform, we have a bunch of other things that basically you could say are automated marketing efforts. We have the auto renew feature, which allows customers to automatically have certain licenses repurchased at the end of its validation period. It sends them an email that lets them know that their license is about to expire, and because you're signed up for auto renew, we're going to recharge you in 10 days. And then if the customer doesn't want to do that, they have the option to back out of that. But that has been very effective at helping people renew. In 2020, we had 21,000 items renewed for over $605,000 worth of sales. And a lot of those people might not have bought their license again. There is research that says some customers don't buy but every couple of years. And so by asking them or inviting them to auto renew and telling them why that's valuable to the agency and why that's valuable to them, people love that option. The cross-sell is basically something that allows us to offer relevant items to customers right before they check out. It's a lot like going to the checkout aisle and at the last minute you grab a candy bar and throw that in your basket. We're able to show customers things that might be interesting to them right before they check out. One of the best examples of that has been our Stars and Stripes program, which is a program that we use to buy licenses for vets and their family members. Prior to having the Go Outdoor system, we had to spend a lot of time soliciting donations from bigger donors. And we might ask Quail Forever or National Wild Turkey Federation or someone like that to help partner with us in that and make a donation, and they would make a one-time donation. Well, now we can ask customers to donate $5, $10, $15. And we tell them why, and we tell them, how we are interested in supporting our veterans and getting them a license. And people love the opportunity to be able to contribute to that. In 2020, that program raised over $23,000 just by using this cross-sell program. Then, of course, we've been able to work with more partners because of our system. We worked with Onyx, like Nels mentioned. We worked with Academy on a Refer a Friend program that allowed people to generate a code in their license profile that they could share with friends and family, who then could go and buy a license. And once a new person bought a license, both parties would get a coupon to Academy. Academy was a very good partner in that effort. And then, of course, working with Meat Eater, the outdoor media company that produces lots of outdoor content on hunting and fishing. They were interested in partnering with us because of some of our capabilities for tracking the effectiveness of those efforts. So, in short, there's a lot happening, and I know I crammed a lot into hopefully a short and easy to digest presentation, but we're doing a lot of ongoing marketing efforts, and there's still a lot more to come. So I appreciate your time and listening.
Yeah, Michael's a rock star at this kind of stuff too, so good work.
Michael's that new generation. Very good. Looks like you guys are doing a lot of the right things. Nels and Michael, we appreciate that presentation. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, new business, discussion of any matter not known about or which could not have been reasonably foreseen 24 hours prior to the scheduled meeting. There being none. Announce the next date for the next meeting. It'll be March 1st, 2021, 9 a.m. in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, all you outdoor Oklahoma lovers. I'm J.D. Strong, Director of Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. And on behalf of our 350 employees, we want to say thank you. In this unprecedented time, there's no question that there's been a lot that has confronted us as a society and as Oklahomans. But in the midst of those dark clouds, there's been a silver lining. People have been getting outdoors in droves. And because of that, we are able to see increased license sales, increased support for all things wildlife and fisheries conservation, and we're able to continue to host events like this state FFA shooting competition that we have going on behind us today. So without that support, without those license sales, we would not be able to put on stuff like this. If you didn't know it, we're a non-appropriated agency, so we get no help from the state legislature or taxpayers. So we depend heavily on those license sales as well as the sale of sporting equipment, guns, ammunition, fishing poles, bows and arrows, you name it. All of those purchases go towards us being able to get the next generation engaged in hunting and shooting sports, as well as other outdoor adventures, fishing, that sort of thing. So on behalf of the Department of Wildlife, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing us this silver lining in the midst of all these dark clouds that we faced as a result of COVID. Get out there and continue to support wildlife conservation through the purchase of your hunting and fishing license. And don't forget, our outdoors are always open.